Kenny McGritty was a Spanish teacher for Benzil Bloomhouse Middle School, located in California. Unknown to the school and the kids' parents, Kenny was a serial child molester, who had molested 14 of his students. Kenny not only molested his students, but he also took pictures and videos to be uploaded to his website, Club P3NGU with Macronin, which was notorious for exploiting the innocence of kids, including infants. Club P3NGU with Macronin generated $3 billion and was impossible to track due to its layers of encryption on the dark web. He then decided to move his business to a private island, where he would construct his $69.3 million residence, and a child sex dungeon underneath it. Kenny used deceptive tactics to find and transport 30 kids back to his island. That night in the dungeon, Kenny and his 26 followers engaged in sexual activities with the children. When the night was almost over, the children were forced to dig their own graves, and Kenny filmed the entire process. All of this was uploaded to the Club P3NGU with Macronin website in order to generate even more income for Kenny. In the following year, he made $36 million from the website. Fortunately, 2 separate cyber tips from different countries were called in and an investigation was launched against Kenny and his website. Soon after Kenny's partner, Devin Cormack, was caught abusing 2 young boys, he told the detectives about Kenny and all of the victims on the island. Kenny was 26 years old, but had gained so much money and power that the FBI wasn't able to locate him for 5 years. Kenny escaped the country, selling off his island to a private investor, before he ended up in the Barbados, living in a yacht he purchased. A lot of celebrities were involved with Kenny's scheme and unable to be touched by the law, but all of his wealth and assets were frozen once he was convicted on all counts of sexual assault and exploitation. Kenny was sentenced to life in prison, although he was given a second chance at freedom if he was able to reveal the names of all his partners. Kenny understood that another life in prison wasn't any better than the first and finally confessed who was involved with his scheme. Those identified with the case were charged with varying levels of crimes against children, and most of them not receiving any leniency due to the harsh crimes they committed. Kenny McGritty had been serving his sentence in the Albertine Falls Maximum Prison for 15 years, and while most inmates simply accepted him and his terrible deeds, there was one inmate who was determined to make sure that he was punished for the horrors he had done. That inmate was named Thomas Anderson, and he had found out through a few other inmates about who Kenny McGritty was. He had learned about Kenny's dark past, that he had sexually abused and raped over 6,000 children, and he had even uploaded it all to his dark web website called Club Penguin. After finding out, Thomas decided that he needed to take matters into his own hands. Thomas gathered a few of the other inmates who were more than happy to lend their help. On the night of the attack, Thomas and the others made sure to spread the word about what was about to happen and gathered everyone in the common room. When Kenny arrived, he was immediately attacked by the inmates. He was beaten until he was almost unrecognizable. They did not spare any punches as they mercilessly beat him. During the attack, Thomas shouted loudly, "This is for every innocent child you abused," and uploaded onto that website. When it was all over, Kenny lay there in a bloody heap, and the other inmates scattered away to their cells. Thomas looked down at Kenny and spat, "You deserve what you got." When the prison guards discovered Kenny the next morning, they found him barely alive and rushed him off to the hospital. The doctors managed to save his life. However, Kenny had been left permanently physically and mentally scarred from the torture he had endured. Kenny's story quickly spread across the prison, and soon, all of the inmates knew that not only had he been brutally beaten, but he was also the man who raped and abused so many children. The other inmates learned a harsh lesson that day, one that Kenny McGritty will never forget. Kenny eventually died after suffering a stroke at age 46 in his prison cell.